Good morning. Welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. It's really amazing that the people have always divided profits, which is not bad by itself, but it's extremely aberrant. But when we see Muslim poets who venerate Krishna, it surprises many. As a matter of fact, Muslim veneration goes to the extent of almost adoration and idolatry. And when the Muslim poet who went on to write the national anthem of Pakistan also wrote a poem eulogizing Lord Krishna. It was a shock to many, but it was a testimony to syncretism in South Asia. But veneration of Krishna by the Muslims is not something new. As a matter of fact, if you have read Urdu poetry or if you have heard it, which I have, you would find that Krishna love is a perpetual theme in not only Urdu poetry but also much before Urdu was born. Al-Biruni notes that when Muhammad Ghazni used the French Sanskrit term of Tar for Muhammad on the coins minted by him, he was in fact thinking of Lord Krishna. Many Islamic scholars like Mazhar Jan have argued that Rama, Krishna, and others were actually the prophets sent to the subcontinent by God. But then there was a time when the people in Islam were more liberal. These were the pre modern scholars who praised Krishna, and it was not considered a blasphemy. For centuries, Krishna has been one of the most favorite personalities of Muslim poets. Johri Kanpuri, a noted Urdu poet, himself says that several ancient poets dedicated collection of dohas written in the Hindu system in praise of Lord Krishna. Under the Chishti Sufi saints, a new genre of literature called Premkya was developed in line with the Persian Mathuri tradition. It talked about the Sufi philosophy of Ishke Hakiki, love for the divine. And that love for the divine was what bound the Muslim poets to Lord Krishna. And as I said, this was much more than that. The literature written in Avdi was aimed at local population and drew from the local imagery and folklore. And in Awadh, you cannot think of anything devoid of Krishna. The gopis symbolized the devotees, while Lord Krishna was the divine. And this was what historian Rana Safai Sayyid Ibrahim Ras Khan wrote in 1548. Imagine it. Muslims sing praises through his devotional bhajan. Another Sufi poet of the 16th century, Shah Baharuddin Janam, wrote a collection of dohas. And he called them Sukh Sahela. Again, Hindi word Sukh. And the three Sufi poets of 18th century, Shah Torab Chishti, Wali Dakhni, and Uzlab, have mentioned Krishna in their poetry hundreds of times. But the greatest was Amir Khusro, 1253 to 1325, a great Sufi poet, are architect of the real Indian composite culture. And in his famous Qawwali Rang, he talks of Gokul like a man gone crazy in love. Urdu poetry on Krishna is believed to be as old as the language itself. Urdu came into being in the 12th century. And since then, No Urdu poetry can be considered complete without mentioning, celebrating, venerating, worshipping, loving Krishna. There's a message for all. Actually, poetry in praise of Krishna centers on his playful activities with the gopis. And Wajid Ali Shah, if you remember, the Nawab Awad, was also Lord of Krishna. He wrote plays based on Ras Leela. And Maulana Hasrat Mohani was a practicing Muslim who went to Hajj many times. And he always worshipped Krishna. He was a lover, whom he called Hazrat Shri Krishna. For the first time, I was amazed when I read Hazrat Shri Krishna. I mean, this is the real synthesis. Mohani went to Mathura to celebrate Janmashtami. And as a matter of fact, Bozani writes, Hasrat ki bhi kabul to Mathura mein hazri. So he was saying that God was kind to him, that his presence in Mathura was accepted. सुनते हैं आशिकों पर तुम्हारा करम है खास. So this could not have been done without a deep love for Krishna. And the cake goes to the famous poet, as I mentioned, Jalandhari, Hafiz Jalandhari, who wrote the national anthem of Pakistan, Qawmi Tarana. But his precious Urdu poem, Krishna Kanhaiya, is my favorite. Honestly, when I read it for the first time, rather heard it because I don't know it. And this Krishna Kanhaiya describes the glory of Krishna, his romance, humiliation in the Kaurav courts, and preparation for war. He paints beautiful idyllic picture of Krishna. It's a coincidence that when he wrote this poem, he wrote possibly from 2 points of view. One was the freedom of India, and second was about his love for Krishna. Today, the mere idea of a Muslim poet writing about a Hindu deity would create curiosity, suspicion, anger, and sometimes surprise and joy. But then, when he wrote Krishna Kanhaiya, or since the time of Al Baruni, as I told you about, more than a dozen poets have venerated Krishna, it was a common thing. However, there's much more to Krishna Kanhaiya. It's no ordinary devotional poem. Jalandhari was a political minded poet, and it draws upon the mythology and personality of Krishna to produce a poem that's devotional and political. It is, in fact, a call to liberate India from the British colonial rule. And if you compare it with Qawmi Tarana of Pakistan, it tells you a great deal about the cultural politics of South Asia. In the very first line, Jalandhari writes, Dekhne walo. Now, this is not something amazing. I mean, imagine it. Urdu poetry is not meant to be read, it's meant to be heard. For example, the ghazals, if they are not sung, lose half their charm. And yet, Jalandhari, who chooses the word dekhne walo, the people who look, could Jalandhari's choice of word be referring to the importance Hinduism gives to the gods? In Hinduism, religion is perceived through five senses, and the primary among them is a sight connecting with the divine. This is pure Hinduism. They see the God. The central act of devotion is when one goes to a Hindu temple and have darshan. Even in Sikhism, when you look at Guru Granth in Sikhism, or when you look at an idol an image of deity, there is an incredible, intricate, symbolic iconography, and that's typical to Hinduism and Sikhism. And when he talks of Dekhne Walo, he is in fact projecting that form. So he was not only venerating Krishna, he was in fact becoming a Krishna worshipper. And further on, he goes to say Saguna Brahman, God with a form. So Krishna, in the poem, we haven't they been there yet. The opening lines are quite abstract. But whether Krishna in reality or representation is something a Hindu god. And then he goes to another thing which is important, Hindu gods and goddesses and the same god are considered a form of light. So he writes in Pekit and V, Ye nar hai ya noor? Is he man? Or is he fire? Or is he light? These descriptions are full of meaning. As a matter of fact, Sajil Imam and Saqib Salim suggest that Jalal is alluding to Krishna as being of light. And here, it reiterates the age old belief of a section of Islamic scholars that Krishna was a real prophet sent by the God to the people of community. Here, a difference is there because Krishna says he is God. And then, he says, Ye Bansri Wala Gokul Ka Gwala. A typical similarity with what the Hindus say. This flute player, this cohort of Gokul. And then, he's praised using typical Urdu expressions and the words relating not to the man but to the God. By God, what glory, he says. Kya shan hai wallah. And is the majesty of God. Ik shan ek khuda hai. Now, for a Muslim to write about a person, ik shan e khuda hai, is something. If he was in Pakistan today, he'll be arrested for blasphemy. It does differ from the traditional Hindu viewpoint and does not equate yet with Khuda, but then Shane Khuda is embodiment of God's glory and majesty. This deification of Krishna has not been done even in Hindi poetry. Even the point about darshan and the importance of sight in Hinduism, Jalandhar displays a very intimate understanding of Hindu religion when he writes, inside the temple, the sculpture of the beauty himself entered and became the idol. But ban gya akar. But ban gya akar, he writes. So the statue has assumed the form, a living form. Now, this goes against the Mohammedan concept of idol worship here. Idol is a living being. And that's what the Hinduism is. They deem idols to be manifestations of God, not mere idols, as long as they are not consecrated in the temple, they are idols, they are statues. But once they are in the temple, the process of sanctity has been there. Then they become gods. And this is what Hafiz Jalandhari says. So the deity is not simply the physical statue, it's a god within the statue. And that makes Krishna idol for worship. And this is something which, as I said earlier, might make Hafiz Jalandhari, if he were not a writer of Pakistan national anthem, a fit case for being a victim of heresy and blasphemy. But then, other words, when he talks of the sensual beauty, turfa nazare, rare happenings. He says, surmat Hawaii, intoxicated winds. Even the winds are intoxicated when Krishna is there. Ulfat ki trange, ulfat is waves of love. So नशा है न मैं है कुछ और ही है. So God is this Krishna is neither intoxication nor wine. It is something beyond. So these charming vignettes are in fact means to transport you to Braj, the music of Krishna. Now, one thing I'd like to tell specifically how he becomes more political. When he talks of Draupadi's being stripped of her clothes, she looks to her husbands and says they're all cowards. Ye Raj Dulare, Buzdal hue sare. This is Draupadi criticizing the Pandavas, her husbands who cannot protect her. These Raj Dulares are royal babies. So basically, he is criticizing all the numerous kings, 500 to 800 kings, who became the darlings of the Britishers, the babies of the British Raj. And he was saying that they are buzdil, they are cowards. The most telling thing is when Draupadi calls Krishna the light of India, Bharat ke wale, भारत के उजाले, भारत के वाले, भारत के उजाले अब तो मुझे बचा ले. So he is the light of India. Krishna has morphed from being an abstract form of God to a symbol of hope, the light of India. And this is the political connotation, which till now nobody else, no Hindu poet had given. Krishna was always regarded as, from the ethical point of view, from the religious point of view, but purely from the anti colonial point of view, never. And then, he talks about Gita, he says, the divine degree has been pronounced, the soul has become swan. Lo ban gayi takdeer, lo chal gayi shamshir. Now, how telling is this? So there's quite a shift. Lo ban gayi takdeer, lo chal gayi shamshir. And the last one is, he cries out that he wants the Krishna to come back. A Hind ke Raja, ek baar phir tu aaj. This cry of anguish, this cry of the desire that he should come back. To aaye to shan aaye, to aaye to jaan aaye. So can anything be more stirring and more evocative? So to say that there's a divide between the intellectuals is wrong. Culturally, the Muslims in South Asia, are derived from Hinduism and their umbilical cord might have been snapped, but it is still not broken. And the worlds have radically different outer clothing, but the inner cultural routings are the same. When he says, "O Hind ke Raja, ek baar phir aaja, to aaye jaan, to aaye shaan." This is basically against the Islamic jurisprudence. But this vote of Pakistan did not hesitate. Krishna was, remains, and would continue to be the love of Urdu poetry. An idol not to be worshipped and venerated, but to be lived with. Who says there is a real divide? It's a divide created by the politicians and narrow minded religious leaders who exploit people. Inherently, they are the same. I wish you could read and enjoy, right from Al Baruni to Hafiz Jalandhari, and see how much love there is. In this case, I also remember Mahendra Singh Bedi, who is directly from the line of Guru Nanak. He was deputy commissioner, an IAS officer, and then he said, he's a great poet as well. And he says, who says Muhammad belongs only to the Muslims? And he was singing a Naat. Naat is a praise of Muhammad. So this cuts both ways. But that's an exception, Mahendra Singh Bedi. Here, veneration of Krishna is a tradition, and the acme is in Hafiz Jalandhari's Krishna Kanhaiya. Thank you.